Good evening, and welcome to Rupert Presents Legend Has It. Tonight, we'll be taking you on a trip around the Rutgers campus. You won't find another tour quite like this.
Together, we will explore the history and folklore of some of Rutgers' spookiest locations.
Are the stories you're about to hear real? Are they scary? Or maybe a little bit of both? That's for you to decide.
So we're starting off tonight at Rutgers Gardens, which is a 180-acre horticultural gardens on campus. But before it was a gardens and a public place that people could come visit, it was actually a farm. And that farmland was donated to the university in the early 1900s. Now, in 1910 is when we have our first reported sightings of the Jersey Devil here in New Brunswick. So I want you to tell us a little bit more about the Jersey Devil. What's the story of the Jersey Devil and the connection to New Jersey?
So in 1735, Mother Leeds gave birth to her 13th child. She lived on Leeds Point down in South Jersey, close to the Pine Barrens. Now, if you can imagine having 12 children already, getting ready to have your 13th, you might be a little bit anxious. Mother Leeds was so upset that she cursed her 13th child. She said, if this child is born, I think it's going to be a devil. And it was born, and it was a devil. And it started to get claws, and its feet started to change, and all of a sudden, it started to claw at her and just flew out of the window and into the night and off into the pines. And that is how the story started, supposedly.
So when these reports would come out, what would people say the Jersey Devil would do?
It would attack livestock. So if something happened to your horses, or you woke up and went to gather your eggs from the chickens and you found them all eviscerated, or maybe one of your cows was not giving enough milk, people would blame it on the Jersey Devil.
Now, the story starts in the 1700s, but we're hearing these reports in New Brunswick in the 1900s. The stories kind of change over time. Why is that?
Well, about the time when people start reporting seeing it here in New Brunswick, there was a lot of sightings all over the state, in Philadelphia even, and it was reported in the newspapers. It was a sort of sensational story. But the stories had been circulating for hundreds of years, since 1735. And every time someone told the story, a good storyteller knows their audience. They know how to take the story apart and put it back together and add some details that really appeals to the people who are listening to the story. For those people who are in farmland, they're probably going to hear about the Jersey Devil taking their farm animals. But maybe you're getting on the train to New York. Maybe you see the Jersey Devil attacking the train there, which was what some of the reports said. So it really depends on the audience, the storyteller. It changes and evolves over time.
And it was such a big story, not just in New Jersey, but around the country. I mean, people were really afraid of this thing. There was points even where the conductors of trains would have weapons to guard the passengers in case the train car got attacked by the Jersey Devil. It's just wild to think of it.
I know. I think that people tell scary stories like this because there are things about their lives that they can't explain, or there are things that they're really anxious and nervous about. And so you can think about things changing over time and people adapting to new situations. In 1735, the Pine Barrens was a wilderness almost, and people were really frightened of what might happen out there. So I think the story changes to change with the times, but it's always about something that's making people scared.
Well, legend has it here at Rutgers Gardens, people who've been just enjoying a walk through the gardens have seen big hoof prints in areas where there are no animals. Also, people who've walked around some of the trails have reported hearing large flapping wings in the area. Is the Jersey Devil back at the farm, the old farm, which is now the Rutgers Gardens? Well, that's for everybody to decide for themselves.
Well, I've certainly heard some wing flapping as I've been walking around here in the Rutgers Gardens. People should come and see for themselves, but beware.
Well, next we're headed over to the College Avenue campus to see some of our other spookiest places on campus. We're on College Avenue near the intersection of Mine Street. Many people don't know that Mine Street got its name because in the 1750s, there was an active copper mine below the surface that ran the length of what's now the street, with the terminus being here, underneath of what is now Ford Hall. Ford Hall, the second residence hall built on campus, was opened in 1915 and is one of the most haunted places on campus. So AJ and I are gonna go inside and see if we can hear anything or see anything interesting. Mining is still one of the most dangerous professions in the entire world. But in the 1750s, it was incredibly dangerous. No regulations. Miners were down in the shaft for 12 to 16 hours a day. They were using candles as their light source. And remember, no machinery either. Everything was by hand. How you got down 200, 300 feet in the ground was by a rope elevator. There were mining tragedies everywhere. So this mine that used to be here is no exception to that. Very dangerous and likely had many accidents. Now, Ford Hall is closed currently. It used to be a residence hall with 60 apartments for graduate students. But when it was open, graduate students reported hearing very, very strange noises down in the basement. So let's go have a look. So AJ, down here in the basement were the shower facilities and the laundry facilities. And the students that lived here reported hearing very strange noises when they would come down here. Sometimes they would hear a moan like someone was trapped or a scream, and there was no one else down here with them at the time. Other people report hearing just a slow and steady tapping over and over again like a pickaxe. I'm not hearing anything right now, but I'm definitely getting a little bit of a uneasy feeling down here. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I agree. I'll be honest, I'm getting like a chill down my spine right now.
The hair is kind of standing up on my neck, and we haven't heard anything yet, but I don't think we have to wait around and see if we do. There's other interesting things to hear while we're on College Avenue, so let's go. Right now we're in front of Old Queens, which is the oldest building on campus, built in 1825. And legend has it that this building and the surrounding area is haunted by a lady in gray, or a gray lady. Now, we believe that that may be the spirit of Catherine Livingston. She was a very, very wealthy woman who lived in New Brunswick, who unfortunately at the age of 26 was unmarried, which was a travesty at the time. Now, she did catch the eye of one young man during the Revolutionary War, a soldier, a young, ambitious soldier by the name of Alexander Hamilton. Yes, the same Alexander Hamilton. Now, he promised a lot. He promised to return. They exchanged many letters while he was fighting in the war, but he ultimately never returned to see her and did break her heart. So people have reported seeing a woman pacing around, a woman up in the cupola waiting for that love. Now, while that is a spooky story here on campus, it's not the spookiest one on the old Queens campus. For that, we have to head into the nearby Kirkpatrick Chapel. Kirkpatrick Chapel was built in 1873 and served as not only a chapel, but one of the first libraries on campus. Now, legend has it that people have seen a young man wearing clothes from another time, an apparition standing approximately where we are right now, staring at that window. Let's go inside to find out why. This Tiffany window was donated and installed in 1898 by the family of Henry Janeway Weston, a Rutgers student who was very troubled. He tragically passed away at the age of 21, just before the turn of the century. Now, why do we think that his spirit comes back to view the window? Let's ask Tiana to read the text that's on the window.
He has outsoared the shadow of our night, envy and calumny and hate and pain, and that unrest which men miscall delight, can touch him not and torture not again.
Perhaps he has found some peace in viewing this beautiful artwork that has been donated to the university in his name. Now let's head to another location on campus. So right now we're on the Livingston campus in front of a building that today we call 44 Road 3. But prior to the university buying the land that this building sits on and establishing the Livingston campus in the 1960s, this building was actually the Officers Club of Camp Kilmer, an Army base that opened in 1942. Now, why would Piscataway, New Jersey be a good location for an Army base?
Well, it's really close to New York City. So this was one of the largest points of embarkation for troops who were heading out to the European theater of war during World War II. A lot of people moved through this base on their way overseas.
That's fascinating. And what do people do at an officers club on an Army base?
Well, it's a long tradition of keeping the officers and the enlisted men separate. Because you see, you want the officers to maintain a sense of dignity and respect, so they didn't want them to be fraternizing or socializing too much with the enlisted men. And it was also practical. There would be a time when those officers needed to make hard decisions on the battlefield, so they didn't want them to become too friendly with the enlisted men on their off time. That's why they would have an officers club like this, where they could socialize, relax, get a meal or a drink, listen to some music.
And I guess it also makes sense to have the officers close to the base, right? So to have their club on the base, because if anything happened and they needed to be back quickly, they were nearby, right?
Yeah, and often they got the best site on the base with the nicest views, so.
So this is another one of those places on campus that there are a lot of very interesting, spooky, haunting stories. So why don't we go inside and see what remains of the Officers Club and hear a little bit more about what people have reported seeing and hearing inside.
All right, let's go.
So in the lobby, the first thing you'll notice is an old ticket booth and a coat check room. So that leads me to believe that entertainment was a big part of what was happening in the Officers Club. What kind of entertainment might they partake in?
They might have come here to have a meal, have a drink at the bar, listen to some music, maybe some big band, maybe some jazz.
Well, this probably happened in the main room, which is a great hall. At one point it had a balcony and a stage. I want to head in there because that's where the spooky occurrences have happened. Now, it looks different today, but in its heyday, this space had a stage, spotlights, audience chairs, had tables up in the balcony where people could enjoy a show in addition to enjoying the food and beverage that were served here. But you can see it looks really different, right?
So what is it used for today?
That's what's really interesting. So this space has been used primarily by performing arts groups. The Mason Gross School of the Arts opera program built sets here, and for many years, the student-run Livingston Theater Company used this space for nighttime rehearsals. And that's where the spooky stories come in. So late at night, students, at the end of their rehearsals, would report hearing music, even though no music was playing, right? A horn or a trombone, kind of out of nowhere. They would also report hearing laughter from up in the balcony area. No one else is in the room right now. No one else is in the building. And one of the strangest things they report is cigarette smoke, smelling it, not seeing anything, no one smoking, but smelling the faint smell of cigarette smoke. Because as you know, in the 1940s, smoking indoors was permitted, right? And something that happened quite regularly. Overall, the students just reported that at the end of the night, when things were winding down, when the entertainment was stopping, they didn't feel like they were alone. And I don't know about you, but I'm getting kind of an uneasy sense myself that like someone has been kind of watching what we're doing in here today.
A little bit. It's kind of like the show is still going on.
Right, and you have to wonder, right? Are the spirits of the officers, are they reliving the amazing times, the camaraderie that they had here at the Officers Club from beyond?
It could be. Maybe their last beautiful show before they shipped off overseas even.
Now, you may think this is the spookiest place we've been so far, but we're saving some good ones, so why don't we head out?
All right, let's do it.
We're on the Douglas campus, just a stone's throw away from Passion Puddle, one of the most beautiful places on campus. But right now, we're in front of a home that's related to one of the biggest crimes of passion of the 20th century, the Halls Mills murder case. So in the 1920s, the Reverend Hall lived here in this house. He was the minister of a nearby church just a few blocks from here. Now, he was very popular. He had a lot of admirers, and one of his admirers was a member of his own choir at the church, who he made the unfortunate decision to have an affair with. Now, that was very controversial in the day, but he wasn't too secretive about it, and it kind of got out. And one night in September, he never returned home that evening. The next morning, his body and the body of the choir singer, Eleanor Mills, was found in a park in nearby Franklin Township. They had been shot, her throat had been slit, and her tongue cut out. And the love letters they sent to each other torn up and laid between them. Now, who do you think the suspect was?
It had to be someone who was really angry.
So the main suspect was his wife, and she was put on trial in New Brunswick. And it became one of the biggest, most sensational trials that had ever happened, not just in New Jersey, but around the country. But due to some botched testimony and the fact that the murder weapon was never recovered, she was acquitted. So it remains unsolved. Now, where it gets spooky is that people then, and even more recently, have reported that on certain nights in September, they have seen a couple who didn't appear to be from our time, walking together and pointing at this house. Now, were they pointing at who had murdered them? Were they pointing to the location of the buried murder weapons? We'll never know. But we do know that these cases kind of changed our relationship to crime and entertainment. I mean, what did you see? Why were these cases such a big part, or why were they such a surprise to everyone?
You have to remember, it was the Roaring 20s. It was the Jazz Age. Our country had just gone through so much with the First World War, the Spanish flu. People were throwing off their inhibitions left, right, and center. And so you can imagine that here with this trial, this was the ultimate inhibition being thrown off by the minister. So you can see that people were really interested, and it was quite a scandal. But it's thought that this murder was actually the model for The Great Gatsby and the tragic ending to that novel. And even from then up till now, you can see that the tragic double murder, suicide, lovers gone wild, and all of that, it's still with us today in our entertainment, in our crime novels. It's something that people can't seem to get enough of.
Well, I think we should get out of here before we run into the couple, okay, that might be walking around, because we have one more really spooky place to see. So let's head out.
Okay.
We've arrived at what I think is one of the spookiest places on campus. We're in the basement of the Jameson Residence Hall on the Douglas campus. And as you can see behind me is an empty swimming pool. The Jameson Residence Hall was built in 1927, and at that time, many facilities had multiple purposes. So in this instance, in addition to housing students, the Jameson complex also included space for performances, space for health services, and spaces for recreation, like a pool. And what was neat and interesting about education at the time is that college degrees included physical education requirements. Many colleges actually required students to pass a swim test in order to graduate. Now, this pool has not been used for many, many years. Smaller facilities like this, they became obsolete when we built larger recreation facilities on campus. Legend has it that the spirits of students past like to visit the pool from time to time. And while it hasn't been used for many, many years, current students using the Jameson complex report hearing sounds from this basement. They hear water splashing, they hear laughter, they hear laughs. Did they really hear those things, or are they just figments of their imagination from the power of suggestion? Well, that's the thing about legends. You never really know.